Good evening, Colorado Battletech. You are listening to the Valhalla Club podcast. I'm your host, John the Caveman. Tonight I'm joined by David Cerberus, Matt Northman, Mike the Viking, and our guest host, Rick Noyes. We are having a special mid-month episode to cover the tournament that we hosted up at Hobbytown Westminster on July 8th. We are going to go down into how the tournament went, what we brought, our overall impressions, and just little tips and insights from a few different perspectives. And hopefully you, the listener, can take away some lessons learned from us and avoid mistakes that we make. That being said, the tournament was held up at Hobbytown Westminster on the 8th. We ended up having 18 players, including myself. I jumped in to make sure there weren't going to be any buys. So really good turnout. We played 4 rounds of Swiss. The rule system was WolfNet Radio's 350 system for Alpha Strike, which, if you're not familiar, has players competing 1v1 with 200 PV on a 3x4 board, pretty much. You have an 80-minute round, and almost all of the scenarios are objective-based. So you're forced out of your comfort zone a little bit. You're not just out there to kill each other. You actually have to play the objective, or you're not going to take home the W.
This include the latest Alpha Strike errata?
Yes, that is true. We did use the latest Alpha Strike errata. And Rick actually took the whole thing. He was our only undefeated player. I did okay. I got beat by Rick. David did okay. He got beat by Rick. And there's a bit of a trend there, yeah.
David in my game is pretty weird because we had 0 objective points each.
We did.
Yeah. It was like a fight on a short bus.
It was a bit of a shit show.
More of a slap fight.
He ran and hid, then I ran and hid. It was what it was.
So yeah, we're going to go ahead and dive into the list we brought. We'll probably go player by player, who we played against in rounds 1 through 4. And then if we had any key takeaways or like pivotal moments, we'll dive into those. And then once we've gone over that, we'll probably zoom back a little bit and widen the scope to talk about the WolfNet Radio's tournament system as a whole, organizing tournament events kind of as a whole briefly, and then some adaptations that I made for this tournament, namely modifying the setup and initiative roles, which we'll go into a little bit later. Rick, you are our host and the reigning champ, so if you would like, you could lead us off what you brought, who your opponents were, and any takeaways, I guess.
Yeah, sure. I brought a Merc list, and I really wanted to lean into the new tag and narc rules to see how those worked out. So I had an Orion and an Archer, both had Stark, and then a Wolverine and a Hankyu Arctic Cheetah, both had tag, an Urban Mech skill 2 with flak to shoot down VTOLs, and then an Urban Mech skill 2 with an Arrow 4 launcher, because why not put one of those on an Urban Mech? And then some LRM carriers of various types, some super cheesy skimmers, and the king of the show, the 16-point Charger at skill 5.
Ooh.
That Charger is nasty. I remember Alex took it to LVO, and you guys had him on, and he talked about it. And when we were playing Jihad, I just had to take the opportunity to try it out. So, and then I played Ben K, which I was very surprised to find out that was not Ben K of the Valhalla Club, some other local named Ben K. So I was standing around for about 2 minutes looking at this guy like, I don't think you're in the right place, man. And he's like, no, I'm Ben K. Like, no, you're not. It turns out he was.
You speak lies.
He was a real new player, so he, that was kind of luck of the draw for me and kind of bad luck for him. But he brought some heavy stuff to. What was the first one we did? Was it
we played Overrun, Domination, Bunkers, and King of the Hill in that order.
Yeah, so he had some slow stuff, and I was able to push in and use the train to kind of isolate his Atlas and ignore it for most of the game, let it play with my Loki, and then everything else of mine shoot up his. Second game, I forget who I played,
I
but
can tell you here in just a minute. You played Charles.
sorry, Charles. I did play Charles.
Oof.
And that one was, what did we call it? What did you say? You just told me.
I believe round 2 was domination.
Yeah, my dice were just so against me. And we went, I think, I won by MOV, but we both got 2 objective points at the very end. I stole one from him and forced him to defend another one. But I had 2 shots on his VTOLs early on with skill 2 and skill 3 flak between the Orion and the Urban Mech. They both failed to hit. So many things failed to hit. All of my artillery failed to hit, and I barely clawed a MOV win with a tie on objective points. And then I played David, and he's Wall of Tanks, and I tried really hard to not let him get all his tanks able to shoot the same target at the same time, which worked out pretty well. And we smacked each other a lot, but no one took any objective points. None of us did even 15 damage to a bunker. You tried to run your infantry in to anti-mech my mechs instead of attacking the bunker because I had them pretty locked down. And then Dave was trying to charge from bunker to bunker to do damage with his...
With Pegasus.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
I did 9 damage with Pegasus running into bunker doors.
And he was set up to take it, and then we had one more round called, and I was able to move my stuff forward and do enough damage to out-damage him. Neither of us did 15 damage, but I did slightly more damage than Dave did.
Yep.
And then, I fought John, and he just threw the game for me because he couldn't win his own tournament.
That is correct. I did throw the final match. It was the only gentlemanly thing to do.
Yeah, that was King of the Hill. I feel like you were in a bad spot with your clan force for King of the Hill. I had that super cheap charger that could just go in there and take the point. You had to kill some skimmers, which you did pretty easily, actually. And I killed your dasher pretty quickly. And then it was just a matter of beating you down with a charger. The charger charged his Thor to hit it for 5 damage, and then punched punched the Thor again in the back or something, or punched your Uller. I don't remember. I think he just killed your Uller outright.
Damage to me. Yeah, he punched the summoner in the chest for 5, and then he just clean punched through the Uller's back for 6 damage. Right, it's a rear.
I think I did a charge to the Thor for 5, and then a punch to the Uller's back.
Yeah, that was a lot of damage from a 16 PV model. It was rough.
Yeah, it was dirty. In other news, I love chargers now, so my next list is going to take the super expensive charger.
The Charger C.
Yeah, at skill 3, it's 100 points.
You should put in a special
dirty.
letter to the WolfNet guys that you would like an exception to the double variants, just so you can take 2 Charger Cs at 200 points exactly.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
I tell you what, you want to bring 2 Charger Cs, I'll bring 2 Aries, and we'll see who wins the punching match.
I think the Charger Cs might do it, man. They got team
They're
of 3
pretty nasty.
and 6 damage, yeah.
So does this mean you're going to also get a Fenris J? Are you going to find the list that has the Charger C and the Fenris J, and you just go full bore?
Do it.
Ooh, that would be nasty. But no, mine's going to be Ilklan, Razeldam, and it's going to have the Vulture Mark III from, it's the MechWarrior 4
Oh, cool.
sculpt.
Are you going to Gen Con?
I'm not. I think that one's not Ilklan either. That one's Jihad too, I think.
Yes, it is.
Yes, you had.
Okay, well, great.
And that's why we can't talk about Charles or Ben's list.
That's right.
Oh, that's why they're not here.
Yeah, no, you did great. And did you have any, I guess, key takeaways from the tournament, either in terms of certain games where it was a pivotal moment, or just the tournament overall? Things you liked, things you didn't like, etc.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll go into it more later, but I really liked your table setup rules and initiative stuff, particularly the preset terrain that made things way smoother for me. I didn't play on but 2 of the tables though, so I had a home field advantage on both of my turn 3 and round 2 and round 4 games. So
Yeah, that was one thing that I definitely need to adjust is keeping track of players and the tables they've played on, because repetition is not fun. But great, man. So then, David? Do you want to take the next stab at here on this one?
So I brought a Davian clown car list.
He did.
And it was 2 Pegasus unarmed hover tanks. And I took those because they have a CT of 12, so an IT of 6. And that IT of 6 was filled up with 4 foot platoons, 2 FedComs, and 2 regular foot platoons with flamers on everything. The rest of my list was 2 Manticore LBXs, 2 Von Luckners, the VNL K100s, 2 Devastators, a Hunchback 4P, a Blackjack 4, a Fireball 10D, and a Bushwhacker S2R. So basically, the mechs were just fillers for the tanks. In every game I played, I had at least 4 tanks on the field, and they were nasty. The Devastators and Volunteers both threw a 5 at medium range, so those 4 tanks were throwing 20 damage most of the day, and they all have 9 hit points. In my first round, I played against Greg W., and we were on table 4, and I don't know that he had ever played against tanks, and it was a bit of a wipe. I ended up with 3 objective points and 200 MOV. Round 2, I played against Braden on the same table. In that one, it was a 4 objective points and 200 MOV win. Round 3 was against Rick, and as he said, we kind of just traded punches and then started trying to shoot at the bunkers, and he outdamaged me by like 3. I think he had like 11 and I had 9.
I think we also just called it once I got ahead of you.
Yeah, once you got ahead of me, there was nothing I could do. It's like, well, crap. All right.
We covered that in practice, Dave.
I know, and I actually mentioned the fact that was why I immediately turned and started ramming Pegasuses into bunkers, because I needed to do damage to the bunkers. And then round 4, which was King of the Hill, I played against Rich B, and that was another just very lopsided fight. The tanks just rolled over everybody. And that ended up with 3 objectives and 200 MOV. So, yeah, the tanks proved to be very effective, but they did come with the downside of being very slow. I think the most fun game was, well, fun for me, not so much fun for Braden, was game 2, and I ran a fireball up into the center of the map. He ran a phantom, which was like a 60-point phantom, and I got a double 12s. And I headshot his phantom in the first shot of the game, and he in turn killed my fireball, but it was a 26-point to 66-point trade, and he only had 3 mechs. Oof. So it was a third of his list gone, round 1, first fire.
That's so rough. Yeah. Shout out to Braden for taking that one. Oof.
Yeah, the game kind of progressed as you would expect it from there. I just started rolling the tanks through and started taking the objectives, and I think his Zeus was the last thing left on the field. But it was a fun game. I did like the map setups and the rolling for initiative and picking the side, because we didn't have to set up the tables, was pretty cool. So props to you, John, for coming up with that idea.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about that in depth later, because it was kind of an improvisation that I made, but it wasn't quite perfect. There's pros and cons to it, and we'll dive into that a little bit more in detail later. But thank you.
You were the war criminal, weren't you, Dave?
I was what?
The war criminal?
Oh, yeah, because I had the top MOV for the day. Yeah, so I killed stuff. 643 MOV for the whole day. Would have been higher.
Murderer.
Would have been higher if I hadn't had to play Rick.
If you didn't run away from Rick.
Well, the Rick had already played my list, so Rick knew how to fight my list.
I knew I had to break up his tanks. Last time I played it, I didn't bring artillery, and he just rolled 8 tanks down my throat, if we're going with John's analogies.
Yes.
Down the throat.
I think I used the word.
It did not go well for Rick the first time.
But otherwise, that sounds like an expression I'd use.
Sure. So I brought my artillery this time to try to break him up, and also on turn 1, I feinted with my Arctic Cheetah and drew 2 of his really slow tanks off to a side where they're kind of out of the fight for the rest of the game. And I think that more than anything.
But they did have the bunker covered.
They did have the bunker covered. They were doing that, but they were not shooting, which you got to kill shit.
That is true. And I also was trying to keep everything 2 inches apart so that the artillery would only hit 1 tank at any time.
Yeah. And, if you hadn't sent something over there to deal with that Arctic Cheetah, I would have rushed into your bunker. So you're kind of screwed either way.
I do want to clarify, a Pegasus rams for 3 damage, Dave. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what is the roll to hit when charging an immobile object?
It was really easy.
Nice.
Yeah. I think it was like a 3 or 4 up he was hitting it on.
Yeah, it was dumb because I was skill 7.
That was a little goofier.
I think I had to roll 5s.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, you're letting 8-year-olds drive hover tanks packed full of infantry.
Well, I just described them as the guy from Mad Max Fury Road, yelling "Witness me!" spraying himself in the face with silver spray paint, and driving into a door.
To be fair, they weren't full of infantry for very long.
No, that went horribly. Rick stomped on all of my infantry.
Yep. Charger squished some. The Loki D cooked a few. I think the Archer punched some in the face.
Yep.
Yeah, and
once the infantry were gone, it was pretty over.
Apologize for my wife's spastic cat just running around the house screaming right now. It's not going to get better, and it's likely to get worse.
It's like my wife's cat. She'll just howl.
No. I do want to dog ear that, because that is the infantry change is one thing that came with the errata, and I believe we all took infantry, so I do want to talk about that a little later. I'm going to go ahead and clear what I brought. I'll be the last player host, I guess. I tried to be thematic with my Jade Falcons. I did have a FedCom list, but I forgot my minis, so I had to break my own contract that I have with Ben because I suck.
Air quote, forgot.
Yeah, forgot. Yeah, I just conveniently forget my FedCom. One time I forgot them on the side of the highway, but they still ended up in my house again, like a curse.
Yeah, come home.
Yeah, like Chucky. I tried to keep a thematic Jade Falcon list. So I had a Cougar, Dasher, Dragonfly, Loki, Warhawk, Thor, Kit Fox, Vulture, and a pair of Elementals. It's one of the few times where I haven't decreased skill. So the lowest skill was 4, and most were skill 3. I was really trying to, abide by the intention of what the clans are. That being said, there's some dead weight. I never used a Cougar in any of my games. I was telling Rick that. Game 1, I played against Ben Bourbon, our co-host. Ben and I play a lot up at Hobbytown, so we were both like, damn it. Can we reroll the pairings? We had a really close game of Overrun. And I think, Dave, it was an MOV tiebreak, and the MOV differential was less than 10.
Yeah, your MOV differential was 6.
So an extremely, extremely close game where I held Ben's home zone and he held the 2 neutral zones. But we both killed over half of each other's lists. So it was just a really close thing. I took a mix of speed and battle line, and he was kind of messing around with some IF stuff. So it was a challenging game. Game 2, I played against Ben K, so the other Ben K. And that was domination. And I had a really big advantage in speed against his list. So I would say he was probably going as an uphill battle for him. And I think I ended up closing it out probably turn 4 or something like that by claiming 4 of the zones. Round 3, I went against the defending champ, Jack. He was taking Ghost Bears, so we had a little clan-on-clan fight. That was bunkers, and I ended up being kind of like the beneficiary of some pretty high variance. I shot down his Balak in 1 turn of shooting, which is pretty exceptional. And then the next turn I shot down his Viper, and without his speed and without his TMM, bunkers is a pretty hard scenario to fight. So I closed that one out. And then round 4, I went against Rick and obviously lost. Rick had, I think, an activation advantage against me. And the artillery was pretty annoying. I think we talked about it because turn 1, I claimed the first point, right? I sprinted a Viper onto the King of the Hill zone, and I shot down his 2 skimmers. And then in return, he nuked my Dasher H with artillery. And I think you halved my Viper. And then turn 2, that big old charger made it into the zone. And it was your charger and my Loki in the zone. And I had the option of either nuking the charger off or nuking the archer. And with the narc aboard and me having no ECM, I was more worried about you gaining more damage from that narc. But in retrospect, that was probably a mistake on my part. When I had the Summoner and the Loki and my Kit Fox all within close range of the charger, I think it was pretty easy, to nuke it off the board. And that would have slowed you down on the objective point front. So I think that was probably my big misplay, and probably that turn 3 is where the game was decided, was by shooting the archer instead of the charger. Lost me the game.
I don't think you ever even killed the archer in the end.
I killed the archer, not the charger.
Probably. Yeah. Okay. I think I killed the Loki that same turn, and then it was my charger in the point with your Thor.
Yeah, that's it.
And then your Uller showed up. Yeah, definitely the Narc was not going to do a ton more damage. I think the archer and the LRM carrier that I had sitting in the back, and the Arctic Cheetah, I think I brought that in that game.
I recall you having artillery, urban mech, double skimmer, LRM carrier, archer, Wolverine, charger.
Yeah, that's right. I brought because the Wolverine and the Arctic Cheetah are the same cost, and I brought the Wolverine instead. So it really the Narc would have only added like 2 damage to the entire list.
Yeah.
Between the archer and the LRM carrier.
Yeah, so me not killing that charger and then letting you catch up and then exceed me on the objective point front was a big mistake. And I think the last turn of the game was my Viper against the world.
I think I wiped you off the board as I was taking the 3rd objective point, and so the wipe.
Yep, it was a 4-1 win in your favor. So it was a beating. Yeah,
well, that's what happens when a clan comes to King of the Hill.
Yeah. But all the same, it was a lot of fun. I was happy to see Ben. I think that was Ben K's first tournament, is what he told me. So that was cool. And so that was our performances individually. The tournament as a whole, Rick won, as we said. Second place went to Zach S, coming over from Aurora. It was my first time meeting him. Really solid dude. Third place went to me, but that didn't much matter. And then 4th was Jack. And Dave, could you help me with the remainder of the top 10?
Yeah. So I came in 5th. Charles came in 6th. Max G came in 7th. John M 8th. Devin came in at 9th, and Greg W at 10th.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. So overall, it was a lot of fun. I had a little concern with there being 16 players or more with 4 rounds of Swiss, that there was a potential for there being 2 undefeated players, but thankfully that didn't happen. The objective spread was pretty tight, actually. So my takeaway from that was that the games were pretty competitive. We didn't have a lot of blowouts, which is pretty rare. I feel like with the WolfNet system, Domination and King of the Hill especially produce like blowout wins. But but it was a pretty tight field. So I was really happy.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we had 5 players that went 3-1, and obviously Rick was the only one who went 4-0. And then pretty much the next 6 players were 2-2, and then we had 3 players at 1-3, and then 2 players at 0-4.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think there were 3-1 players that had more objective points overall than I did. They just got to go undefeated.
Yeah, the 2nd through 4th all had more objective points than you did, Rick.
Yeah, crazy.
Why did we invite you on? I mean, did you even earn it? Come on.
Well, if you hadn't thrown that last game for me,
Yeah.
What do you guys think about playing in Jihad?
I really like the Jihad era. I'm not a big fan of clan invasion. I feel like clan invasion favors the clans. But usually I advocate for FedCom Civil War. But Jihad is like taking FedCom and just making it a little bit crazier, because then you have like C3, C3I, Blakis. Even, I guess, you could have Society too, right? But like,
Yeah.
So it's a little bit more
a lot of
insane,
experimental
than FedCom.
I was a hair's breadth away from bringing a Society proto-mech list.
That's cool. Yeah.
I was kind of surprised we didn't see more Word
Well,
of Light
second
stuff.
place went to Word of
I think
Word
there
of
were
Light.
only
1 or
2.
2.
Zach S. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just never played them.
Overall, did you guys see a lot of kind of the Jihad era tech, or was that still not as much, not as prevalent as it is in other?
I didn't play against a single C3 list, or heck, I didn't even play against anybody who had VTOLs.
You played against my Era 4 Irby. I'm pretty sure that's a Jihad. The story of the origins of the Era 4 Irby is hilarious and comes from a Jihad Gen Con game.
Yeah, I mean, I saw ECM, I saw VTOLs, I saw C3, I saw NARC, so I kind of got a little bit of taste of the whole Jihad. I'm strong too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll admit, I got lucky because I didn't bring any ECM. I only had like 3 flak in my entire list. So the folks that I played against were, I don't know how I would have done against a C3I list.
It was just something I was kind of wondering with WolfNet kind of going to era-specific events, if you really see, a real buy-in into like moving into the new tech of each era, or is it still like mostly like basically clan invasion and behind that that you see a lot of the lists in, or do you see a lot of the new tech? So, and in Alpha Strike, it's a little bit different because it's more just a lot of stuff gets combined into the numbers, whereas in Classic, you might have different tech that kind of shows up a little bit more. But yeah, that's why I was asking about the kind of the list diversity in Jihad.
Yeah,
I think people, there's always your few people who want to play the Angel mechs from WoB or C3I stuff, but I think most people do it because of the style of the mechs and not for C3I, even though it is really good.
I will say probably like FedCom on, there's just like a more like a greater preponderance of like ECM and like flak, because there's more LBXs and the clans get hyper assault Gauss rifles or whatever the heck they're called. So, like, you'll just have, like, a unit that you're going to pick anyways. And then you look at the unit special and it has, like, flak 333. And you're like, oh, that's pretty good. So, but I do like the era locked. I think that's good for the health of the game.
Yeah, for sure.
So, starting with, like, the errata stuff, right? The big one being the infantry. Now, when they disembark, move half of their listed movement and still gain their TMM and any modifiers, makes them a good deal more dangerous. And I was curious too, because in bunkers, that extra movement from the infantry can be huge, because then they can more easily infiltrate the bunkers. What was your guys' kind of takeaways from using infantry or playing against infantry at the tournament?
Charles used them against me on the second game, and he dropped 2 battle armor from his VTOLs that I should have shot down earlier in the backs of my urban mechs, and was able to use that movement from the VTOL to get them around to the back so that they couldn't get shot at by the urban mechs themselves. That was really the only like hot drop I had to deal with, and then I never actually took the only unit in my list that didn't make it onto the table was my 1 battle armor that was actually meant to kill things instead of the one that was supposed to take some hits for me.
Oh yeah, your sombreros.
Yeah, the Loki's hat.
Mm-hmm. Forgot about those guys.
So I brought infantry, and it was halfway effective. Obviously against Rick, not so much because I didn't have a bunker to put them into, and then they got stepped on. But in game 1 against Greg, he brought an Annihilator, and I surrounded the Annihilator with all 4 infantry, and they just started ripping that Annihilator apart.
Wait, you did the thing that you were fearing would happen to you?
He had already backed up to the edge when I dumped all the infantry on him. And it's an Annihilator, so it's TMM 0 anyway. So, I mean, I didn't feel bad about it.
You played against 2 Annihilators?
No, just 1.
I thought Braden had one.
Maybe it was Braden's Annihilator. Yeah, it was Braden's Annihilator. Not Greg's.
Cool.
Braden brought the Annihilator. And, so at the end of the game, the infantry were just tearing it apart. And then the tanks finally got there and finished the job.
Brutal.
So, I mean, it was nice having that extra 1 inch of movement once I dropped them off. But when you had four infantry piling out of 2 Pegasuses, it really didn't matter.
Yeah.
They just dumped flamers onto the Annihilator and shot it. So,
yeah.
I think he killed 2 of my infantry, but then the Pegasus just moved in and took their place.
I think the rules change really favors battle armor over conventional infantry. It really lets them, they can move farther generally, except for jump infantry maybe, but you can't even use jump movement. So we had that discussion on the forums afterwards. But yeah, the battle armor can use their movement, get to something. They make easier anti-mech attacks than conventional infantry. They can really, really be nasty.
Yeah, I agree. Battle armor seem a lot more worthwhile than conventional infantry for a lot of different reasons. I mean, they're faster, they're harder to hit, they're more effective in anti-mech, and they're more likely. I think standard infantry can't get mechanized or X-mech specials, right?
No.
So battle armor just almost universally more.
But they cost half the price.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, but then they're hitting anti-mechs on a +3 instead of a +1.
Yep. And I made that mistake on, I think, the second game. When you corrected me about it, that's when I was like, oh crap, I did that wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to dive into it a little bit, why do you think that change was made? What is your guys' thoughts on why that was I don't know if necessary is the word for it, but a change that was put out?
I think it makes sense.
I think NC Kestrel's been real frustrated with the rules he inherited and wanted to rewrite the entire transportation section for a while now. Which he didn't rewrite the whole thing, but he just made it all make more sense and be more understandable than it used to be.
I will say also, I really did like the change where infantry and base-to-base contact can still shoot.
Yeah, I mean, I think the changes
I thought that was
are a huge win.
I thought it was a really great change.
They act more, I guess, like how they do in your mind, how you would picture them. They received huge buffs though. I mean, like that extra movement is huge, and that extra TMM is huge. Because
if you get in TMM on the dismount, that's great, especially for bunkers. It didn't come up in our game, but before you dump your infantry, and at best you can hope to hide behind the thing you got dumped out of,
right,
and then they just get nuked.
Yeah. I mean, right. You'd have battle armor and stealth. That's +2, and then you'd use the partial cover for +3, so +5 total. But now with the TMM and the partial cover, you can drop elementals behind a Viper, and they're impossible to hit. Which is kind of nuts. So that might need to be looked at competitively,
Dave was saying,
but thematically it's great.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's more of what you would think. They're moving, so they should get that kind of modifier. But to me, it was interesting that this happened because like right after LVO last year, we had them kind of get nerfed, and now they're kind of getting like rebuffed.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of seeing.
I don't even know I call it nerf. They just got
development
fixed.
team kind of making fine tuning and adjusting what they want infantry to be.
Post LVO, they just got a points change for some of the slow, heavy damage.
Yeah,
ones.
the assault battle armor got a points increase.
Yeah, which they should have because they were ridiculously efficient. You could just carry like 3/3 damage profile turret on your back and then just drop it down wherever you wanted, pretty much, right?
I do feel like this change really, obviously it's a buff to battle armor, but I feel like things like elementals that aren't the best of all battle armor really benefit from them. Like, I feel good taking battle armor or an elemental for 20 points or whatever. If I can move it onto something, get my TMM and anti-mech it.
Yep. And for your listeners, this is kind of like a weird thing. Elementals are jump infantry or jump battle armor, and they can only jump when disembarking from Omni vehicles. Is that right, Rick?
Yeah, that's right. So anything getting out of a IT type transport with an IT number cannot use jump movement getting out. But my VTOL infantry can still use VTOL movement. So
that's weird.
And you can shoot at it with flak.
Also true.
Oh, that's another thing that came up. It was a question, sprinting infantry. This is something I got wrong. But when a infantry unit with a jump value sprints, it uses that base number and times it by 1.5, just like any other sprinting, but it's not combined with jumping. So you would just use your flat TMM value.
Nope.
And then a separate note would be VTOL infantry can only ever use VTOL movement. So if they land, they can't move at all. They don't walk.
Which is silly, but not worth errating, I guess.
Any other notes about infantry before we move on to pre-placed terrain?
I'd say I'm pretty happy overall with the infantry changes. My one gripe, however, will still remain that mechs cannot move through infantry bases like they can in Classic. Because we all know Alpha Strike is a derivative of Classic. Tiny little dudes shouldn't be able to box in an Annihilator.
Yeah, agreed.
That shouldn't be a thing. They should be able to move through it. Now, I get the stacking thing, you can't overlap, but if I've got the MV, the movement available to move completely through the base, then they absolutely should. So overall, I'm happy with the infantry adjustments. With that one gripe, that needs to be put back in my opinion.
I would like that. I think that thematically be another win. And for the listeners who aren't familiar, basically a unit carrying infantry, like David's trooper version of the Pegasus, can move into base-to-base contact with a mini, disembark its infantry units, and so long as those infantry units are able to touch base-to-base that target mini on the opposite corners. So if you're touching at least three of the base sides, three of the opposite base sides of a target unit, you lock it in place. Because a unit, when it travels, has to have clearance equal to the width of its base. And
the width of the base cannot go through a single space.
And you would see this be applicable for certain high-speed, really annoying units like a Dasher or a Fireball, which can normally move extremely fast. But if you are first in the activation order, you can get a personnel carrier in base to base and then lock it in place. And it won't be able to move that turn. It won't be able to earn its TMM. And then you're just, effectively removing a really annoying piece. So
yeah, it's especially dangerous to those Dasher type things that want to wait till the end of the initiative anyway to try to get a back arc shot that they can't get shot back in. So if you can catch one of those, it just counterplays them really, really nationally.
With the Dasher argument, I will be devil's advocate to my own argument, and that's especially when it's specifically coming to the WolfNet thing and their tournament setup. You exchange the overall list beforehand. That's where it comes down to knowing what your opponent has and making that assessment on what they will bring. So maybe, given the current rule set, that they can block in a Dasher, maybe don't save it for last. But that's a gamble you need to make as a commander. I still think 100% that mech should walk through infantry bases, but just saying.
Well, it's another answer to those high TMM, very mobile units, where before pretty much the only answer was artillery, either off board, which hit on 8s, or onboard, which I think Rick hits on 6s, right? If it's tagged stationary skill 2 shooter.
And confirm.
So those were basically
think
like
that's right, yeah.
kind of like the rock and paper kind of, versions. Obviously, dashers and fireballs have a much higher damage ceiling if they don't die because they're doing 6 damage into your butt every turn. Whereas an artillery hitting on 6 is going to do 2 damage, 2 damage, 2 damage. So it's kind of like burst damage versus chip damage, and it's just player preference.
Yeah, overall, I've never been super happy with how my artillery performs. They occasionally get really clutch shots on dashers, but a lot of times they just miss.
Yeah, I mean, an artillery that kills a dasher pays for itself immediately.
For sure. And I think the only dashers I've ever killed are yours, John.
What did you guys think? Oh, well, besides Rick, did anybody else take artillery?
That's Desgra did it, David.
I
said that's Desgra.
Well,
do that here.
Rick, what did you think of the new artillery mechanic?
Oh yeah, the artillery did change. We have the margin
changed?
of failure now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, actually, that was a shower thought that I had and posted in the WolfNet Discord, and then Kestrel was like, oh, I thought that was that way already. So, yeah, I love that. And I think in our game, John, I took a shot with my spotter, and I chose to shoot and spot with him at the same time, and I think I missed by 2, I think. So my margin of failure was 2, so my drift was 4 inches, and if I just not shot that shot, it would have only drifted 1 inch and actually still hit something.
Correct.
Or 2 inches, I guess. But
that's exactly right.
Still would have hit. So yeah, I learned that really trying to get the best shot possible is actually great for artillery now.
Yeah, I think that's another thematic win where it just works. It feels like you're the decisions you make actually have more impact on where the artillery goes now, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and because before you could have a skill 0 artillery, and if you don't hit your target number, it's still going to go some random distance in some random direction. And now, the more highly skilled and trained artilleryman is going to be more accurate more often.
Yep. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, whoever circled us around the artillery change. David! All right. So then, is there anything else from the errata that you guys want to discuss before we move on to pre-placed terrain?
Narc and tag. I think the tag with LR with indirect fire is interesting, but it wasn't super effective for me. I think it could have been better.
Yeah, the tag change was kind of. I don't fully understand. The narc change was a huge buff where it takes place instantaneously, which is really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Garbage.
Indirect fire has never been great for me, and I don't think it's great now, even with tag as a spotting option, but it was okay.
I really only have myself to blame for not bringing ECM, so.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, it wouldn't help you with tag anyway, right? But
wouldn't help with tag, but at least your stupid narc beacons wouldn't have been on everything.
I only narked the one Manticore.
That was 3 people you killed. 3, you monster.
Just take more AMS, man. That's always the answer. More AMS.
Yeah, I do. I'm not sure if all my opponents were tracking their own AMS or not, but definitely AMS is great.
Yeah.
AMS has saved my ass so many times.
I think I totally forgot about it on the one game I played where I brought the Bushwhacker.
The only reason I did so good at Copo was because of AMS. Out of all my mechs, only one didn't have it. And there was a lot of, missile specials out there. And I contribute my, third place, second place? I think it was third, to AMS, 100%.
I just wish AMS didn't have it still allows the minimum of 1 to get through, because then it diminishes its value when I see that. I wish it was something that kind of related to the special number, it would be the special -1 or whatever, and then just leave it. So if it was LRM 111 and you just -1 and you get the 0 or something like that, instead of they can still get 1 damage through no matter if you have AMS or not. So
yeah, because if the missile specials of 1, that's essentially an LRM 5. Or, a small SRM, something like
LRM
that.
10.
Yeah.
Zero star is going to be your LRM 5.
Either way, being able to, the AMS is shooting from however far out, and
I'm okay with it because in
I-
Alpha Strike, the
I'm with
AMS
Matt.
isn't using ammo. It's not creating heat. There's no chance that you can. Well, actually, that's not true. If you have AMS, you can still get ammo exploded in Alpha Strike, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, I took a grasshopper with AMS once instead of one with E&E, and instantly reloaded that and check.
Boom!
Although I guess it does kind of also make sense that, like, if you're taking, like you said, Zero Star was an LRM-5,
Yep.
so that's what an LRM-5 and then a small laser. The laser connects and does some damage, but the missiles do enough to bring it up to the 1 point. I don't know. I'm indifferent now.
And you got to think that the standard rule is full damage and not multiple attack rolls. Even though everyone here plays multiple attack rolls.
What isn't Mar the standard now?
No,
Or did
not
Mars is now
not
vanilla?
in ASC. No,
it's still an optional rule that everyone plays.
But it should be, honestly. Alpha Strike without Mar sounds awful.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that.
Well, I mean, I
It's
see
great
the
for
point
when I
if
play with
you're-
the kiddo.
If you're playing a large, like, battalion on battalion game, the standard Alpha Strike damage makes sense.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, if you're trying to get through like a huge game quickly. But
I would like to see like rules developed for unit activation and also unit attacks, where like you just attack once, like you just have one damage roll for a lance.
That's called Battle Force.
I think that's Battle
that's
Force.
What that is. That's a whole other game.
Cool. But yeah, Snark tag, good catches. Anything else before we move on? Nope. Okay, cool. So normally in the WolfNet rule system, there's 10 to 15 minutes given to players to set up terrain. You have basically 2 turn 0 initiative rolls. The very first one you do, the winner chooses to either place the first piece of terrain or to automatically win initiative going into turn 1. Now, the terrain, 10 pieces are placed, and players alternate placing them, and it can have a really, really big effect on how a game goes, especially the placement of hills. Can really drastically change sight lines on the table, and my experience is it's been one thing that really separates experienced from newer players, is that newer players I don't believe fully understand the consequences of where they're placing their terrain sometimes. And it can create a really large imbalance just in turn 0 before the game begins. And then the second die roll in turn 0 is your deployment order, which is when you just alternate placing minis. And then you go into turn 1. So for this tournament, I chose to replace those rules, and I set up terrain for the entire tournament, all the tables in advance. And then when players get to their table, that turn 0 roll instead becomes the winner chooses to win turn 1 initiative, same as before, or they choose which of their board edges will become their friendly board edge. Whichever option they don't choose, their opponent automatically gains the other benefit. And then you have your turn 0 deployment initiative phase, the same as the WolfNet rules as written. And doing so, the goal was to speed up play, have more thematic tables where the terrain was a little bit more coherent, I guess I would say, and visually appealing, and then create less room for abuse, where basically a veteran player and a new player are, that veteran player is going to have even more of an advantage going in. Of those 3 goals, I think that the time part succeeded. We saved a lot of time by not having to adjust terrain every single round. The visuals, I think, were good. And then the play balance, I'm kind of mixed on because, some players love to replace terrain. Other players were like, I really felt like I kind of got caught out because my list wasn't, didn't have the tools, I guess, to best make use of this terrain, if that makes sense. But that's my kind of perspective as the person who put it out. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say as the players. So
I'd agree. I think I definitely was able to take advantage of terrain, especially if I played on a board twice, a little more than my opponent. I think also having a small printout for the specialty terrain that you had, saying what you can and can't shoot through, or what blocks line of sight and what doesn't, would have been helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I played on the same boards twice, like I said, and I played on the same side both times too, and I found myself, if I won the roll or if I was choosing my side or whatever, usually just choosing where I'd already had my stuff, so I didn't have to. I could be lazy and not have to move it. Um, we did run into one problem. I think Charles and I ran into a problem when we were playing Domination, where a large crystal structure terrain piece was over the top of both of my home domination points. So we decided amongst ourselves to like rotate those pieces of terrain until we could fit the domination point in there. So just being more aware of where those points can be when you're setting stuff up would be useful. But I think overall it worked pretty well. And if because it was kind of a surprise to us, like the night before, that terrain was going to be pre-placed. I wasn't really worried about it one way or another. But I guess if somebody had a list that needed to place their own terrain, then maybe just letting them know ahead of time that that's how it was going to be played would quell their problems with it.
So although I didn't play, we did this a very our Remember Rosselhog event about a year ago. Well, I don't even know when it was, but we Alex and I preset the maps. We also preset the scenario for each of the maps. So basically, people would move between different ones, and whatever one you landed on, whatever map you landed on, you played the scenario that was already set up there. So that was a difference there. But I really liked it because we did like a little sheet giving each map kind of its own little narrative. Like, oh, this is this city, and you guys are fighting over this particular objective, and it wasn't just like some flat, WolfNet objective. It was like you're fighting over this building, or you're fighting over these supplies, or things like that. So I really enjoy kind of adding the narrative back in, even within the tournament setting. So I'm a full proponent of doing something like that.
I like it too because I agree with you, John. It does limit the. If you've played WolfNet a couple of times, you know where you need to put the terrain, and you know your list, and like for me, I didn't read that it was going to be pre-placed, so I was already planning like, okay, if I need to move my tanks can only move 6 to 8 inches, then I need to put my first piece of terrain 6 inches away so that I can get cover, and then put another one so that they could move from cover to cover as they moved up the board. Instead, I just had to fight out in the open, and then I just rolled them up as a murder ball down the middle of the map.
And I think what you said about the ability of a veteran player to essentially win in turn 0 by placing terrain better than an opponent. People have played WolfNet a lot, particularly games like King of the Hill. It's real important to block your opponent's ability to enter the hill and get line of sight to it from like close short range. So you almost always see some sort of double stacked hill between you and the hill itself.
Oh yeah, that would have crushed me on King of the Hill, but I had in the game I played, I had a straight line of sight and straight path straight into the middle. So
yeah, and John in my game, there's a lot of open space in the middle. I think that was true for most of the boards. Again, I only saw 2, or I only remember 2. But yeah, I think I really liked the pre-placed terrain. It took a lot of the mental energy of playing in a tournament off of my plate as well, which was great. Those between bunkers and terrain placement, those are like the most mental energy I'll use during a WolfNet game. And the rest of it is just playing Alpha Strike and having fun.
I've already talked about it a little bit, but I'll also throw out that if I think about it like in the BattleTech universe, you show up to a planet, you've got your drop ships, whatever. You have your forces there, sure. You don't get to pick and choose the geography of the place. I mean, you're there, the geography is already set. You adapt what forces you put out on the field. Not you don't get to pick and choose where this canyon is and that. So to me it makes total narrative sense. Even just in like you show up to a battle with your forces and adapt to the terrain.
Yeah, I'm there with you, Matt. This is I mean, I didn't play in this event, obviously, but this would be the second Colorado event that had pre-placed terrain, and I really liked the pre-placed terrain that you did at Copo, especially from that narrative aspect. And my same argument was right there in line with you, whereas when you show up to a planet, you don't get to build your battlefield. It is what it is. So I really like the role for board edge, but the TO pre-placing terrain. And I know, so like at LVO, the WolfNet guys had planet-themed terrain that, so like the snow or the rubble or whatever, based on whichever planet. And that was awesome. So I think for like premier WolfNet tournaments, I would like to see those two avenues meld into one, where you've got the thematic terrain, but it's also pre-placed. Because that makes 100% perfect sense in my mind.
And it looks better. So
Yeah.
it looks awesome. And it does save time. I understand the game within a game. I get like keeping that part of the rule set for like quick pickup 350 games. That makes perfect sense. But for an actual like premier tournament at a con or whatever, I think it makes more sense and is less strain on everyone to have pre-placed thematic terrain. So if those two things could get together and become a thing, like I would be so happy.
I think I like it. I like it for our events here in Colorado. So I'm a fan of keeping that theme going.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
I think there's room for a mix too, where you have like maybe just the hills or buildings are pre-placed, like the line of sight blockers, but each player gets to place like two tree
secondary
templates or
terrain.
something. Yeah. I like it a lot. I really like that it takes some mental effort off of me as a player. And I think you guys used it in your Battlefronts.
Yeah, Matt and I
campaigns
did.
as
yeah,
well,
we
right?
have had
as well.
some of that.
Yep.
Yeah.
It worked great there too.
But yeah, it still goes in line with what was it? I forget who said it. But even at premier tournaments, so like at LVO, right? We had brand new people playing in a tournament at a premier tournament, which is awesome. But if they're not spun up on the mini game of terrain, that sucks for them, like a lot. Like
Well, it's
honestly,
interesting too because the WolfNet rules
and that negates
kinda have, like in my opinion, like some X-wing influence. Like it's clear to me that like at least some of the guys that made it came from playing X-wing.
Aaron.
Where X-wing you have like 6
Aaron.
obstacles and you place it at the beginning of the game. But X-wing it's 6 obstacles and it takes you just a handful of minutes, and it's the obstacles you have to pick from. I think there's like maybe 20 to 30 total. And for a lot of players, it just becomes something that like it's rote. Whereas in the WolfNet system, you have 8 scenarios. The terrain is going to be different for each table. It is a lot more taxing. So, I think it helps a lot with the speed and the attractiveness of tables. But I do need to iterate and make some adjustments. I think I had common feedback that like a lot of the tables were pretty open in the middle. So there were some tables that were pretty bloody. I mean, we look at our MOV and we had some pretty bloody
Yeah, I think
games.
a lot of them were pretty open. I think a lot of them were pretty symmetrical, so it didn't really matter which side you picked. So as far as the initiative and pick your side roll, I wasn't really worried if I won or lost those either way. Like first round initiative doesn't really matter very often unless it's one of those sudden death, take all the points.
Yeah, I don't know.
games.
Some of them it matters so much. Like CTF
It kind
and
of is
King of
with
the Hill, it
Capture the
matters
Flag.
so much.
I mean, King of the
in
Hill,
these
because
initiatives.
everything was wide open, I think it would have mattered more if we were placing our own terrain because we would block things off and you could have prevented getting shot while in the hill. But, in our own game, we both ran into the hill on turn one and we both shot each other up turn one. You just managed to kill my stuff and I didn't manage to kill your stuff.
Well, you killed some stuff, just not all the stuff.
Yeah, not the thing that took the point.
Right. Yeah, and another advantage too of having TO place terrain is that some of the tables too you'll see like hills are touching woods, or like there'll be like a giant river feeding into a lake, and like that wouldn't happen in the WolfNet rules as they are. So I do like that. For the some tables were less symmetrical, and like the woods are prohibited terrain for hover vehicles, and at least in the WolfNet system they're pretty common to see hover vehicles because they're so fast and they're really good objective pieces. So if you choose the side, if your opponent chooses the side of the table that's more open, and then you're stuck on the side of the table where your hover vehicles can only approach up the middle or the right, like the left side is just completely prohibited to them.
Yeah,
It's
that's fair
big.
because I only played on the two tables. I will say, when I played Charles, I was on the big green crystal table with the volcano in the middle, and the water out the side of the volcano, kind of separating my side of the board from his side. There's slightly more room on his side, so when we're playing domination, he was able to get to the center objective, and I actually had to wade my charger through the river, spend a turn in the river getting shot, and then get into the objective to start punching his light mechs. So that was pretty annoying, and I definitely would not have done that if I had been setting it up myself.
Yeah. So it's one of those things in terms of fine tuning. I need to go back and look at like the Infinity the Game forums, because like in that game terrain is so hugely important that like there were like threads and posts and articles about like terrain setup, and trying to kind of get that right balance. But kind of in my mind's eye, how I view it going forward, tables will fall into the broad categories: terrain density being light, moderate, or heavy, and then likewise giving like a 1 to 3 value in terms of asymmetry. So symmetrical, slightly asymmetric, very asymmetric. So you can create a lot of different tables just with those 6 factors. And then on my part as the TO, I need to keep track of what tables players are on, and wherever possible, pairings will be on tables that are new to them. Because, if you're going to go through the trouble of setting these tables up, making them look nice, you should also go through the trouble of making sure your players actually get to enjoy them. So those right now are my big takeaways and what I'm going to be working on going into the future.
Did we ever look into, because I know we were talking about this after the game, or after the tournament, did we ever look into Cryodex and see if you can add that extra data point column for which table?
I have not, because I'm a
You
caveman.
cannot.
I don't think you can. No.
You can go back and look at the previous rounds because Cryodex doesn't actually assign you a table. It just assigns
lists
an opponent.
Yeah, it assigns pairs. It would be up to the TO to take that extra little bit to see if they were on the same table or not and change it up.
If you use the row number in Cryodex for the table number, then you could correlate, but otherwise there's nothing in Cryodex where you can add data points.
Oh, and the other catch is, of course, to have like the objective zones be clear of terrain.
Yeah.
Because the night of and the morning prior, I was kind of just eyeballing it. And in some cases, tables had to be adjusted. Usually for like those corner ones, it's like 8 inches in, 8 inches in from either side.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly what we had to adjust for.
Yeah, or if you just, smartly place hills so that, a bunker could fit perfectly on top of it.
Smartly anything for me is a big ask.
I'm not throwing shade. I'm just saying.
I think Charles has a really good diagram of all of the objectives overlaid on top of each other on a single WolfNet size template.
Okay.
So you can see where all the objectives.
Charles has worked out kind of a template.
Yeah, they all line up pretty well. Yeah. I'll have to.
Well, I mean, if you just lay down the King of the Hill and the 4 outer objectives,
Yeah.
you'll cover everything.
Well, almost everything.
Except maybe
PTF.
the capture the flag.
Capture the flag in the center of hold the line.
Yes, that
It's
is
basically
correct.
like 9 templates, right?
In terms of like where, 9 zones where objectives could be. 3 on your friendly board edge, 3 in the neutral zone, 3 on the enemy board edge. Yeah. So that's a good point. So if you are going to do preset terrain, I think it behooves you to know what scenarios you're going to play and set up your tables accordingly.
I hate that word.
Behoove.
Well, the last tournament,
Let me caveat off that.
I think it was the December tournament. We actually pre-selected the games the night before.
Yeah, and I think that's fine too. It's another thing that speeds up the tournament. For all our listeners and the tournament organizer types, our takeaways, I think broadly would be, before the tournament, making the fine adjustments to make sure that your terrain doesn't conflict with objectives. Varying the terrain in terms of terrain density and how much it favors one side or the other. And then if there's any special terrain, making sure that there's a note or graphic for the players to reference so that everyone's on the same page. Things are fully transparent during the game. And then using kind of the extra freedom that you as a TO have in setting up the tables to make them more attractive and do things a little bit different. Have woods touch hills. That's not something that can happen in the rules as they're written. So, you get to experiment a little bit more and have fun with it. I think, broadly speaking, those are things I learned from the tournament. I'll probably coordinate with Charles, and I'll be writing on my own, kind of putting out like maybe a written document that I can refer to and others can refer to kind of help out. Because terrain was such a huge part of Infinity the game, and with the objectives in Alpha Strike, they're a huge part here too. So spending the time to kind of analyze and put forth kind of templates and kind of suggestions, I think will help a lot in raising the value of, like, I guess, entertainment in games and consistency. I think that's what we're all looking to achieve, right? As players and tournament organizers, we're all looking to have as much fun as we can in the time that we have. And
And that's
exactly.
what it's about.
So, we're all on the same page. It really helps us a lot. I do want to say, before we get to the shout outs, a huge thanks to the people who both helped me set up the terrain prior to the event and the people who helped me take everything down afterwards. Ben, Greg W, David, Charles, Max, L, all you guys were huge help. So I really appreciate it. And I had a lot of fun hosting the tournament, and I hope everyone had a lot of fun playing. So I really appreciate you guys coming out.
I had a great time. It reminded me a lot of old X-Wing Store Championships.
The best, man. I loved X-Wing so much. That game dying, it was a really hard pill to swallow. Like, they still play, but they have like store champs this season, and like they're getting like 12 players to a store champ. It's just like that hurts. For reference,
once they swapped over to 2.0, that they lost most of their audience.
I think
COVID
really did it, man.
Yeah, it was COVID for sure.
In 2018, the Denver System Open was 172 players. It was a huge tournament. I'd love to see BattleTech get up there. I think there's the potential for it. There's no shortage of nerds, and it's a pretty clean, objective-based tournament system. And, I think we're going to continue to iterate, but I'd love to see it grow.
Yeah, BattleTech's ripe for an efficient tournament setting.
Yeah.
It's ripe.
Way more money if we're going to host a 170 person tournament. That's a lot of terrain.
Yeah, that is a good point.
A lot of space.
That's when you get the stores to buy in.
Yeah.
And they start buying up Thunderhead stuff because he is cranking out some good shit.
Yeah, and
Shout out to Thunderhead.
I found some really good terrain. I think we're getting off topic.
We are.
Good terrain, but Death Ray Designs is doing some MDF buildings that look great.
I'm more into the MILFs. That's my preferred.
Oh, God.
I'm not familiar with those. What are those, John?
You'd have to look it up.
Go, roger that.
Urban Dictionary. Yeah.
Not even Urban Dictionary, bro. Just Google.
Might be in Webster's by now.
Just don't Google
Wouldn't
it
be
at work.
surprised. Yeah. So I believe that's a pretty comprehensive recap of the tournament we had here. Any final notes from you guys, or do you guys want to start wrapping this thing up?
Headshots are bad, okay?
Yeah. All right. Well, great. I think we did what we came out here to do. You guys want to do any shout outs here in our little mid-month special?
Sure.
I covered everyone who helped me with terrain. Another shout out to Hobbytown Westminster for being our hosts. They're a really nice little store up in Westminster, which is just northwest of Denver itself. And a shout out to Matt and Jeremy and Brian and the rest of the staff there. They're just really helpful guys. David, who are you shouting out to?
My shout out goes out to Braden for being a really good sport about taking a really bad break in our game. So I'm sorry about your Phantom, but you took it like a champ.
Sorry, not sorry.
No, Braden's super solid, dude.
It was the roll of the dice, man.
Yeah, it happens.
The dice be like that sometimes.
There was nothing I could do about it. It was 12s, and then I rolled another 12. It was like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I've been on the receiving end before. Not from you particularly, but it sucks. But I mean, that's the dice and that's war, So
yep, it happens. How about you, Rick?
I will shout out you, John Caveman Unga Bunga, because you put on a great tournament, and I had a great time. I also want to shout out Ben K, the other Ben K, not Bourbon.
Not Bourbon.
Yeah, for being another Ben K. And first tournament, I think it was like
it was his first tournament.
Third, if that, Alpha Strike game, because I was in our game. I was like teaching him stuff and showing him things he could do, and showing up to a tournament, barely playing the game and having a good time. I hope he had a good time. But shout out to you, Ben K.
Yeah, he did. I mean, at the end of the game, he asked me when's the next one. I was like, that's a good question.
September.
And Matt, you briefly were there. Do you have any shout outs?
I was briefly there and enjoyed seeing everyone again. It's been a little while, so yeah. Thanks for keeping it rolling there, everyone there at Hobbytown. Enjoyed that. I'm actually going to shout out the two people that I have played most recently. The only people that I could bring with me on the move, my two sons, William and Alex. They are in-house players, and they have to play with me, and I force it. So there you go.
Good for them.
And now he's going to have to force them to listen.
No, they have no choice. If they want dinner, they have to play Battle.
Straight up.
And Mike, do you have any shout-outs?
Well, I guess spur of the moment shout out Rick for being a good steward of the game. You knew you were facing a relatively newer player, and you taught him. You didn't take it easy per se, but you also didn't steamroll the guy. So shout out on that. And then shout out for me would be the Mr. TikTok BattleTech guy. He does live things on TikTok where people that join his live stream can take control of a mech, and I did that on July 9th and didn't intend on doing that the entire night at all, but I did. I ended up taking control of a Crusader, a Kellhound's Crusader, fighting some Crescent Hawks. And it was actually a good time.
That sounds pretty cool.
And the people that I played with, Mr. TikTok BattleTech obviously moved all the units around and everything because it's definitely decentralized because it's over a live stream. But the Unrivaled Souls, who else was there? Robert, Captain Gunzo, the Super Nerd. Some of those individuals were on my team. Some of those were not. And there were others that I didn't get screenshots of their username. But it was actually a lot of fun on a TikTok live stream, which that's a sentence I never thought I'd say. But so shout out to all those folks and that individual and Rick for being a great steward of the game.
Nice.
That's me.
Cool. Well, that covers it then.
Thanks, Bam.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. And for our locals, this mid-month episode, we really kind of keep it stripped back to the essentials. But since we are talking about tournaments, future events would be Tacticon. There, to my knowledge, is not going to be an Alpha Strike tournament there. I think that's going to be more kind of like narrative games and, con games where it goes a little bit longer and just shoot the breeze. And in September, we have our Battle for the Sphere, run by the illustrious David. And that's going to be a whole heck of a lot of fun. And then either in September or October, I'm working with Zach S. Out of Aurora to run another WolfNet tournament, very similar to what we had in Hobbytown. This time, just over in Aurora. Again, the whole goal is get the community together, have fun, and by having these events in big, stores, other people get to come see us have fun, and we start drawing in more players, and we help grow the community. That's what it's all about. So thank you again for listening, and I hope you have a great night.
Last call.
Last call.
Get out.
Thanks for joining us today in the Valhalla Club. Special thanks to our sponsor, Ares Games and Miniatures. Ares is the premier online retailer for all your Battletech needs. You can contact us at thevalhallaclub@outlook.com. If you are in Colorado, please join your local community group on Facebook and Discord. If you are able to help support your local Colorado Battletech community, subscribe on Patreon to Colorado Battletech. This Patreon account is used to supply prize support for local events and assist in venue costs. Links for the Valhalla Club Discord, the Colorado Battletech Patreon, and Facebook group are in the show notes. Until next time, mech fans.
No one has responded to anything I've said so far.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to respond to you, Rick.
Okay.
What?
It's gross.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Great.
It's the same way I don't make eye contact with people on the corner of the street.
It's that prolonged eye contact that really matters.
Yeah.
And Mike, I guess I have to apologize for however many cat sounds you have to edit out of this fucking recording.
They're probably just going to end up staying. I didn't hear any of Dave's soundboard because I muted his
Maybe I should have
soundboard.
shouted out to Cooper, my cat, then, I guess. Cooper the cat. Yeah.